The Hollow Ones. A Horror by Fallen Angle, or Chapter 1, The Whispers. Elias was not a believer in the supernatural. He was a historian, a collector of truths buried in dust and paper. When he inherited his uncle's decrepit farmhouse on the edge of town, he expected silence, peace, and solitude. Instead, he found whispers. The first night they were faint, like someone calling from the basement. By the third night, they were unmistakable. A man's voice rasping his name, Elias. He tried to dismiss it. Old houses creak, air moves strangely through pipes. But when he pressed his ear against the basement door, the voice grew louder. And he swore he heard others, a chorus beneath the lead one, whispering in agony. Our Chapter 2, The Crawler. By the fifth night, Elias could no longer sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling when he heard it, a scratching. A long, slow drag of nails against wood. He shone his flashlight upward. For a second, he thought he saw cracks spreading across the ceiling. Then something shifted in the corner. Two enormous black eyes stared down at him. The pale thing crouched like a spider, its mouth stretched in a blackened grin. Elias froze. It did not leap, just watched. Then, with a sickening jerk, it scuttled back into the darkness above, vanishing into the crawl space. From the basement below, the whispers returned, louder, hungrier. Chapter 3. The Book. Desperate, Elias searched his uncle's belongings. Hidden in a trunk, he found a leather-bound book. Its pages were brittle, written in cramped, uneven Latin. The entries spoke of the Hollow, a patch of cursed land where the veil between life and death was thinnest. Those buried there were not at rest. They became the Hollow Ones. They were sketches, too. A thin, corpse-like man with an open jaw labeled Ver Cavis, the Hollow Man. Another of a pale figure crouching on all fours, its limbs twisted, called Reptor, the Crawler. But worst of all was the passage scrawled at the back in his uncle's hand. They whisper to be heard. They scratch to be noticed. The more you see them, the more they stay. Do not answer, do not look, do not listen. Captor. The Hollow Elias pieced together what he could. The Hollow Man fed on silence, on breath, on voices stolen in the dark. The Crawler fed on flesh, dragging victims into walls and ceilings, two reflections of the same curse. And his uncle's final note chilled him. Once you inherit the house, you inherit them. The Hollow Ones do not haunt buildings, they haunt bloodlines. The scratching above grew louder every night, the whispers from below more insistent, until one evening both sounds stopped. Silence filled the house. And Elias realized the worst truth of all. They were no longer around him. They were with him. Chapter 5. The Claim. The next night, the power went out. The house sank into darkness. Elias lit a candle, the only light between him and the black. The whispers began circling the room. Dozens of voices, each one gasping for breath. Then came the scraping directly behind him. The Hollow Man emerged from the shadows, jaw unhinged, whispering his name in 100 stolen voices. At the same time, the Crawler dropped from the ceiling, limbs cracking as it landed on all fours. Elias backed against the wall, the flame trembling in his hand. The Hollow Man leaned close. His voice was not many this time. It was one, his uncle's. You cannot fight them. You can only join. The candle flickered, and when it went out, the house went silent again. Epilogue. Weeks later, the farmhouse was found abandoned. No sign of Elias, no struggle. But locals say if you stand outside on a quiet night, you can hear two things. Whispers calling your name from the basement, and scratching across the ceiling just above your head. The Hollow Ones had grown by one more voice. The Hollow Ones, the third voice, the Hollow Man. Hunger, silence, voices, breath. Form. A corpse stretched thin, eyes like pits, mouth forever open in a whisper. Domain, basements, graves, empty houses. Claim. Steals the air from your lungs, keeps your whisper forever. The shared origin. All three came from the Hollow, the patch of cursed earth where silence, hunger, and terror merged into flesh. But they are not separate accidents, they are siblings, each born from one aspect of human suffering. The Hollow Man, the silence of abandonment, the last breath of the buried. The Crawler, the gnawing hunger of famine. The grinning one, the madness of fear, the laughter that breaks when hope dies. The old texts say there are 7 Hollow Ones, each representing a twisted reflection of basic human need. 3 are awake, the others sleep beneath the soil. Act 1. The Inheritance. A scholar named Elias inherits a farmhouse, where the Hollow Man and the Crawler lurk. He uncovers his uncle's journals describing the Hollow Ones. At first, he only hears whispers in the basement. Then he sees something scuttling in the walls. But when he finds a cracked mirror in the attic, he sees a figure grinning behind his reflection. The Hollow Man whispers his name. The Crawler scratches the ceiling. The Grinning One smiles from the glass, and Elias realizes they are not separate hauntings. They are gathering. Act 2. The revelation through the journals, Elias learns of the 7 Hollow Ones. His uncle spent his life studying them but made a mistake. The more you name them, the more real they become. Elias's uncle wrote 3 names before he died. 3 that now walk: the Hollow Man, the Crawler, the Grinning One, and Elias has begun to write their names too. Act the 3rd. The Hollow. As Elias descends into obsession, he traces their origin back to the Hollow. A cursed ground where silence swallowed sound, famine twisted flesh, and fear cracked the mind. The book warns, do not seek the Hollow. Do not write the names. Each word is a seed. Each seed is a door. But it's too late. The Hollow Ones follow him everywhere now. Shadows, ceilings, mirrors. His reflection no longer smiles when he does. It smiles first. Act 4. The Claim. The farmhouse is found empty. Elias's journals end mid-sentence, ink trailing off as though his hand had been pulled away. But new pages appear after his handwriting stops. Written in jagged scrawls not his own. We are 3. We are not enough. 4 more wait beneath. And beneath that, a crude drawing of a face with no eyes, only hands pressed against the inside of the paper, as though something was trying to push through. Epilogue. Now the whispers are heard in houses across the town. Scratches echo in apartment ceilings. Mirrors hold grins a moment too long. The Hollow Ones have begun to spread. And each time someone tells their story, each time someone speaks their name, another seed is planted. It is not the soil that is cursed. It is the telling. The Hollow Ones. Part 3. The Unraveling. Chapter 1. The City Sleeps. Uneasy. Marianne thought leaving the farmhouse would save them. She was wrong. The Hollow Ones were not tied to that house. They were tied to her now, to Victor, to anyone who had seen them. In the city, strange reports spread. Tenants waking in the night, unable to breathe, as if a hand was clamped over their mouth. Families finding long scratches across ceilings and walls, even in high-rise apartments. People catching their reflections, smiling a second too late. It wasn't just happening to Marianne and Victor anymore. It was spreading like a sickness. Chapter 2. The Whispering Rooms. Victor tried to study Elias's journals again, but the pages were changing. New words appeared where none had been before, jagged and wrong, as though written by another hand. We are 3. We are hungry, the 4th is waiting. That night, Victor woke to find the apartment filled with whispers. Not words, just breathing. Dozens of shallow, rattling breaths. In the dark, he saw the Hollow Man standing at the foot of the bed. Its mouth was open, black eyes fixed on him. Victor gasped in terror, and in that instant the Hollow Man inhaled. Victor collapsed, lungs burning, unable to breathe. Marianne scrambled for the lamp, and when the light came on, the Hollow Man was gone. Victor coughed violently, choking up something thick and black. Chapter 3. The Ceiling Split. 2 days later, the ceiling in the hallway above their apartment door cracked. At night, Marianne heard it scuttling. The sound of palms slapping plaster, fingernails scratching wood. Then one evening, as she locked the door, a pale arm shot down from the vent above, claws brushing her face. She slammed the door shut, heart hammering. The Crawler was hunting in the open now. Chapter 4. The Grinning Glass. Marianne covered every mirror in the apartment, but it didn't matter. The Grinning One didn't need mirrors anymore. One night she woke to find Victor standing at the foot of her bed, smiling too wide. His lips stretched unnaturally. His eyes bulged, fixed on her. Victor? The smile vanished. He collapsed, gasping, swearing he had no memory of moving. But Marianne saw his reflection in the window, still grinning long after he'd stopped. Chapter 5. The Field in the City. Marianne couldn't take it. She left the apartment at dawn, desperate for sunlight, for people. But as she walked through the crowded city streets, she froze. Across the street in the morning glare stood a figure, too tall, arms too long. Perfectly still, it didn't move. Didn't breathe, she blinked. It was gone. When she looked back at the sidewalk where it had stood, there was a wet, hand-shaped smear on the concrete, pressed from the inside. Epilogue. The fourth stirring. That night, Victor was found dead in his apartment, his body frozen in a smile that split his face open. Marianne fled, but the whispers followed. She wrote one final note in her journal before disappearing. The hollow man took his breath. The crawler took his body. The grinning one took his mind. And the fourth waits at the edge of every crowd, where eyes can't quite focus, where no one looks too long. The watcher he sees. The hollow ones. Part 4. The Watcher's Shadow. Chapter 1. Hollow Streets. The city didn't collapse overnight, it rotted. First, people stopped leaving their homes at night. They claimed the streets breathed, the wind sounding like lungs filling and emptying. Then ceilings began to split in apartment complexes. Maintenance crews went in and didn't come back out. Families woke to find pale handprints on their walls, their doors chewed at by something that shouldn't fit inside. Mirrors were the worst. They started refusing to behave. Some caught reflections of strangers standing behind you. Others showed your mouth moving a few seconds after you spoke. Many people smashed theirs, only to find reflections waiting in puddles, in glass, and polished metal. And through it all, the sound of faint, rasping breaths lingered everywhere. Chapter 2. Marianne's Descent. Marianne wasn't running anymore, she was searching. She carried Elias's journal like scripture, chasing the scattered fragments of his research. In libraries, she demanded forbidden archives. From old churches, she stole burned manuscripts. Everywhere she looked, the same names returned in whispers. The hollow man, the one who breathes for you. The crawler, the one who waits above you. The grinning one, the one who wears your face. The watcher, the one who sees when all others are blind. But Elias had left the fourth mostly unwritten. He had drawn only a single symbol, a ring of eyes, none of them looking the same direction. Chapter 3. The Culling. By winter, the city was unlivable. Hospitals overflowed with patients gasping for air. Their lungs rotted black from within. Entire families were found curled in corners, their faces stretched into rictus grins, teeth cracked from endless smiling. Police reported finding claw marks leading up buildings 40 stories high, but no evidence of how they'd been made. At night, the skyline itself seemed to move, windows opening where no one lived, shadows crouching on rooftops, reflections peering out of black glass towers. No one stayed after dark anymore. Chapter R. The Eye in the Crowd. Marianne walked among the refugees fleeing the city. She tried to look ordinary, tried not to draw attention, but she noticed something. In every crowd, at every bus station, at every checkpoint, there was always someone who didn't move. Someone whose face she couldn't quite see, though everyone else seemed to ignore them. When she tried to focus, her vision blurred, and yet, the figure's head always turned toward her, watching. Chapter 5. Victor's Voice. On her last night in the city, Marianne dreamed of Victor. He stood before her, his face split open in that eternal smile, eyes empty pits. "They are 3, he rasped. His voice was not his own, but the fourth has been here all along. You cannot hide, he is already behind you. Marianne woke screaming. The window beside her bed was fogged, though it was open to the cold night air. On the glass, drawn in condensation by a finger she hadn't seen, were 4 words, "I see you now." The Hollow Ones, Part Fae, The Watcher Awakens. Chapter 1. The Dead City. Marianne didn't remember leaving her apartment. One moment she was staring at the message on her fogged window. The next she was in the street barefoot, journal clutched against her chest, moving through a city that should have been silent. But it wasn't. Every window whispered. Every shadow twitched, every puddle rippled without wind. And everywhere she turned, faces leaned from broken glass, not strangers anymore, herself. Dozens of versions of her stared back, each one blinking a second too late, smiling when she wasn't. The grinning one was near, but behind their mocking faces she felt the weight of another gaze, something vast, something that didn't blink at all. Chapter 2. The Silent Mass. She reached the old cathedral at the city center, half collapsed, its spire bent like a snapped bone. The doors gaped open and within hundreds sat in the pews. At first, Marianne thought she'd found survivors, but as she stepped closer, she saw the truth. They weren't alive, they weren't dead either. Their eyes were gone, scooped clean, black pits where sight had once been, but still their heads turned with her every movement. Following, watching without eyes, Marianne stumbled backward, bile rising in her throat. The Watcher had gathered them, an audience of the blind, waiting for the sermon of a God unseen. Chapter the 3rd, The Whisper. She dropped Elias's journal on the altar and opened to the last unfinished page. Words sprawled there that hadn't been before. He does not need a mouth to speak. He speaks through what you are not. Her own voice filled the cathedral, though her lips were closed. Marianne. The blind congregation shifted in unison. Heads tilted, throats opened, wheezing. Marianne, you carry what was mine. She felt it then. The journal was wrong. It wasn't Elias's anymore. It pulsed in her hands like warm flesh, symbols crawling across the pages as though desperate to escape. Chapter 4. The fourth name. Her knees buckled. She clutched the journal tighter, but the words inside seared her mind. Not written, burned directly into her thoughts. The hollow man takes breath, the crawler takes height. The grinning one takes face. But I take sight, Marianne screamed as darkness poured across her vision. Not blindness, but too much seeing. Layers of reality peeled open like rotten wallpaper. The hollow man crouched in the rafters, chest expanding with borrowed breath. The crawler scuttled across the ceiling beams, limbs bent wrong. The grinning one knelt in the aisle, dozens of faces sliding down his skull like masks melting in heat. And above them all, something greater loomed, too vast to fit in the church, its outline fracturing her sanity just by existing. A ring of eyes endless, each staring into different worlds. The Watcher. Chapter 5. Bargain of sight, the blind congregation rose. Their mouths opened, not in screams, but in wet, wheezing laughter. The Watcher's voice filled her skull again. Give me the journal, child, and I will leave you 2 gifts. Eyes that never close, and the mercy of never being alone again. The hollow ones froze, waiting. Even they seemed bound by this greater shadow. Marianne's hands shook. She knew Elias had died to keep these pages hidden, but her vision bled, her mind splitting under the pressure of what she'd seen. And the journal pulsed, begging to be given away. The Hollow Ones. Part 6. The Bargain Deferred. Chapter Lacane. The congregation moves. Marianne clutched the journal to her chest. Her vision swam with impossible shapes, each eye of the Watcher pulling her toward a different world. The blind congregation shuffled forward, their heads tilting in rhythm, mouths wheezing in unison. Not words, just breath. The hollow man inhaled it, his chest swelling grotesquely. The crawler drooled from the beams, saliva splattering like rain. The grinning one's many faces laughed silently, lips splitting wider. They were waiting for her to give in. Marianne whispered through clenched teeth, "No." The Watcher's voice echoed inside her skull, calm and eternal. "Then you will see anyway." Our Chapter 2, Flight. The pews rattled as the eyeless congregation surged toward her. Marianne bolted, clutching the journal. The cathedral doors slammed on their own, but she threw herself through the narrow crack before they shut completely. Outside, the city was worse. Windows were filled with Watchers, faces pressed to glass from inside dark rooms. Some were human, some not. Every single one turned as she passed, and above, the skyline itself watched. Hundreds of lit windows formed patterns that weren't random, eyes blinking open in the towers. The whole city was the Watcher's body. Chapter 3. The Refuge. Marianne fled into the underground tunnels, desperate for silence. She found an abandoned subway platform and collapsed, shaking. For the first time in days, there was no whisper, no scrape, no grin, just the distant drip of water. She opened the journal. The pages had changed again. Do not mistake silence for safety. He sees here too. She slammed it shut. Her pulse thundered. She almost threw it onto the tracks, but then footsteps. A man emerged from the tunnel, lantern in hand. His eyes darted nervously. "You're not the only one," he whispered. "Others see them too. We've been waiting for someone like you." The Hollow Ones. Part 7. The Survivor's Secret. Chapter 1. The Circle Below. Marianne sat at the edge of the candlelit chamber, clutching the journal so tight her knuckles bled. The survivors huddled together, whispering prayers in broken voices. Their words were not for God nor for salvation. They prayed to him, not aloud but in shuddering breaths. Each inhalation and exhalation carried rhythm, as if mimicking the rise and fall of some colossal lung. She recognized it instantly, the hollow man's breathing. They were practicing his ritual. Later, Chapter 2, The Stranger's Smile. The man who had led her there approached, setting down his lantern. "You should rest," he said gently. Marianne nodded, though every nerve screamed. When he smiled, the expression lingered too long. His lips quivered at the edges, twitching wider as though resisting some deeper pull. The grinning one's touch, her stomach churned. These weren't survivors. They were fragments, half devoured, half spared, vessels. The Watcher hadn't gathered them for safety. He'd gathered them to keep her close. Ori Chapter 3, The Pages Shift. When the others finally slept, Marianne crept aside and opened Elias's journal. The ink bled across the paper, forming new words as if written in real time. "They are not yours, they are mine. My hands, my lungs, my smile. They dream with my eyes." She flipped the page. Another line burned itself into being. "You cannot run from a world that looks back at you." A drop of liquid splashed on the page. She thought it was wax until she touched it. Warm red. She looked up. The ceiling of the chamber had no cracks before. Now it wept blood. And in that blood, faces opened. Dozens of them. All hers. Chapter 4, The Devouring. The survivors stirred awake, only they weren't waking. Their heads twisted at wrong angles. Jaws cracking, sockets bleeding through the bandages. One by one, they began to speak in voices not their own. Breathe. Smile. Crawl. See? The chamber shook as if the earth itself bent to those words. The hollow ones had gathered. All 4 of them, bleeding through flesh that was never meant to hold them. And Marianne, journal clutched in her hands, was at the center. Chapter 5. The Decision. The man who had first greeted her stepped forward. His face split open at the seams, revealing teeth that weren't his. Too many rows for a human mouth. "Give it to him," he gurgled, voice three-toned, male and female and something else. "You were chosen for this." The other survivors staggered closer, their bodies breaking with each step. Above, the ceiling's bleeding faces whispered in unison. Eyes that never close. Marianne's chest tightened. She had only seconds to choose. Burn the journal here and now, risking unleashing the Watcher without his tether. Keep it, but let it consume her sanity as his vessel. Or try the unthinkable, use it against them. The Hollow Ones. Part 8 at the journal's teeth. Chapter 1 and the ink turns black. The survivors closed in, their bodies jerking like marionettes. The air thickened with the sound of ragged breath, scraping nails, and low, unnatural laughter. Marianne dropped to her knees before the altar of dripping blood. She opened the journal. The pages no longer held words. They held teeth. Thousands of tiny, black, serrated teeth gnashing between the paper. Her hand bled as she touched it, but instead of recoiling, she pressed harder. The journal drank, and then it began to write for her. Chapter 2. The words that wound symbols spilled across the parchment, glowing like molten iron. Marianne didn't recognize the language, but the survivors did. They shrieked. Their bodies convulsed, bending in ways bones should not bend. One clawed at his own chest, tearing his lungs out in bloody handfuls. Another twisted her jaw until it cracked, mouth stretching into a permanent scream. The journal was devouring them, not by fire, but by rewriting what they were. Marianne gasped, her own veins burning black. For every word the journal wrote, it carved a scar deeper into her flesh. She wasn't just holding Elias's work anymore, she was finishing it. Chapter 3. The Hollow Ones Answer. The survivors' deaths didn't free the Hollow Ones. It enraged them. The cathedral walls shuddered. The Hollow Man's rasping breath shook dust from the ceiling. The crawler's limbs pierced through the walls, chitin clicking. The grinning one pressed his face against the floor, dozens of smiles stretching in the stone. And through it all, the Watcher's voice pressed into her skull. "So that is your choice. To write against me." The candles went out. Every eye, real, false, human, inhuman, blinked open in the dark. Chapter 4. Becoming Ink. Marianne staggered to her feet, the journal glowing in her hands. Her own blood spilled onto its pages, absorbed instantly. New words appeared. Ink is not enough. The story needs flesh. Her reflection shimmered in the puddles of blood around her. But it wasn't hers anymore. Her reflection smiled, crawled, breathed without lungs. The hollow ones were inside her. But she realized something Elias had never written. The journal doesn't only record them, it binds them. If she kept writing, she might cage them, even the Watcher, at the cost of her own body, her own sight, her own soul. Chapter 5. The fifth name. As the walls split and the four abominations leaned toward her, Marianne screamed and pressed the pen into her own skin. She carved words not onto the pages but into her arm. The world shook, the hollow ones froze. Blood dripped onto the journal, forming a final unseen entry. The fifth hollow is born, the one who writes. The Watcher's voice trembled, not with fear but with delight. Yes, you will be mine, child. Not prey, not prophet, but author. The journal shut itself with a thunderous crack, and in the silence that followed, Marianne realized something terrible. The hollow ones were no longer hunting her. They were waiting for her to write them into the world. The Hollow Ones, Part None, The Fifth Hollow, Chapter 1. The first word. Marianne's arm throbbed, the carved symbols pulsing like open wounds. The journal quivered against the floor, eager, alive. Her hand moved without command. Ink and blood mingled on the page as she wrote a single word: breathe. The cathedral itself inhaled. Windows shattered outward as air was sucked from the city. For miles around, people dropped to their knees, choking on emptiness. The hollow man laughed from the rafters, his chest swelling with stolen lungs. But Marianne felt it. She had directed it. She had told the city to breathe. She wasn't their victim anymore. She was their mouthpiece. Chapter 2. The city trembles above ground. The city bent to her words. Streetlights flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat. Windows cracked into grinning shapes. Billboards twisted, letters rearranging themselves into phrases no one understood but everyone feared. The refugees who had fled weeks ago awoke in their camps screaming the same name: Marianne. And in the skyscrapers, entire floors filled with silent, motionless figures. Not alive, not dead, waiting for her to write again. Yonter, Chapter 3. Elias speaks in the shadows of the cathedral. The journal whispered with Elias's voice. You've done what I could not. You've bound them. Marianne's hands trembled. Bound? They're not bound, they're everywhere. They are always everywhere, Elias sighed. But now they are yours. You've joined the circle, the fifth hollow, the only one who can command the others. She clenched her jaw. Then I'll command them to end. Elias laughed, a sound like tearing paper. Child, stories don't end. They only spread. The Chapter 4. The outbreak reports bled through the world beyond the city. A town hundreds of miles away woke to find mirrors filled with strangers who didn't exist. A hospital in another country evacuated when every patient began laughing in unison. In one quiet village, the stars above rearranged themselves into an eye that didn't blink for 3 nights. Marianne's words were no longer confined to the city. Every stroke she carved into herself seeped into the fabric of the world, and the Watcher was delighted. Chapter 5. The seventh seal. One night, as she scrawled frantically to keep the abominations contained, a new line appeared in her own handwriting. Though she hadn't written it, 5 have risen. 2 remain. Marianne froze. The Hollow Man, the Crawler, the Grinning One, the Watcher, and now, her, 5. Which meant there were still 2 hollow ones unawakened. And as she read the words, her veins flared with fire. She wasn't just writing the story. She was summoning the next chapters. The survivors had whispered it once. When the 7th rises, there will be no night. Only seeing, only watching. The 7th wasn't here yet, but she was the 5th, and somewhere in the dark, the 6th was stirring. The Hollow Ones, Part X. The 6th stirs, Chapter 1. The black broadcast. It began with the news. Across the world, every television, every radio, every phone glitched at the same time. Static screamed, then fell into silence. A single phrase bled through, whispered in Marianne's own voice. I see you now. Millions froze. Some clawed at their ears. Others stared, unblinking, until their eyes bled. Entire cities fell quiet as though holding their breath. The world had heard her. And more importantly, something else had too. Chapter 2. Governments fall silent. Governments tried to intervene. Borders were closed, flights grounded, soldiers deployed. But soldiers vanished mid-march. Entire bases woke to find their own commanders grinning with unfamiliar teeth. Parliaments found themselves staring at galleries filled with eyeless faces. The hollow ones no longer hid in cracks and shadows. They walked through boardrooms, war rooms, and bedrooms alike, and each report carried the same phrase, whispered by survivors who shouldn't have lived long enough to say it. The fifth writes, the sixth dreams. On chapter 3. Marianne's burden in her cathedral. Marianne's skin was nearly black with writing, symbols carved deep, glowing faintly in the dark. She hadn't slept in days. Each time her eyes closed, her words bled further into the world, uncontrolled. She begged the journal to stop, to let her rest. It only laughed in Elias's voice. Rest? No, child, your pen is prophecy, your sleep is scripture. And when she finally collapsed into exhaustion, she dreamed of the sixth. Chapter here. The dreamer. She saw it not as a monster, but as a silhouette beneath the earth. A figure curled like a fetus, sleeping in caverns deeper than any map. Its body was pale and translucent, veins glowing faintly like constellations. Its chest rose and fell in endless slumber. With every breath, entire mountains shifted, seas churned, and forests withered. The sixth hollow. The sleeper. The one who dreams the world differently each time it turns. And Marianne realized with horror, her words were not summoning it. They were waking it up. Chapter 5. The first tremor. The world shook. Not an earthquake. An exhale. Buildings sagged as though tired. Rivers changed course overnight. People vanished from photographs, entire families erased as if they had never existed. And in the deepest tunnels beneath the dead city, something vast stirred. Marianne woke, her body shaking, blood dripping onto the journal. On its page was a single new word burned in fire she hadn't written. Soon. Chapter 1, The Forgotten. It started small. A boy vanished from his school desk mid-class. The teacher, wide-eyed and screaming, begged her students to remember him, but none of them could. Not his name, not his face. Not even the seat where he'd sat. By the end of the day, his parents no longer existed either. Their home was gone, their photographs blank. The boy hadn't just disappeared. He had been unedited, a sentence erased from the world's draft. And around the globe, it kept happening. Now chapter the Minoru. The sleepless hospitals reported waves of patients who could not sleep. Not for hours, not for days, not for weeks. Their bodies withered, but their minds did not fail. Instead, they screamed about shadows moving just beyond sight, about being trapped in someone else's dream. One man clawed his eyes out, shrieking that he could feel eyelids closing over him, but they weren't his own. Doctors sedated them. It never worked. The dream always held them awake. Chapter 3. Marianne's denial in the cathedral. Marianne tore at the journal with her bare hands, ripping out page after page. Each scrap of paper writhed like a dying insect before crumbling to dust. It didn't matter. New pages appeared in their place. Pages she hadn't written, but that bore her handwriting. Every line spoke of the sixth. Every paragraph bent reality a little further. Every word was another turn in the sleeper's restless body. She screamed until her throat bled, but the cathedral only echoed her cries in a dozen voices, her own, spoken back to her by things unseen. Chapter 4. The tremors seismologists declared impossible readings. Fault lines shifted where no fault lines existed. An island in the Pacific sank overnight, while a mountain range in Europe grew taller by hundreds of feet. But survivors in those regions spoke of something worse, dreams that became real. A fisherman dreamed of drowning, and his entire village was found underwater the next morning, though the ocean lay miles away. A child dreamed of fire, and her city woke to find the sky burning, though no flames touched the ground. A priest dreamed of silence, and his congregation was discovered dead, their mouths sealed shut with their own skin. The sleeper wasn't fully awake yet, but every time it shifted, someone else's dream rewrote the world. In Chapter 5, The Whisper Beneath. Marianne collapsed, bleeding into the journal, and in her fading consciousness she felt the sleeper's voice for the first time. Not words, a pulse. A steady rhythm like a giant heartbeat deep below the earth. Each beat carried a thought into her skull. I do not wake. The world wakes for me, and soon you will too. She screamed, clutching her head. As the cathedral walls bent inward, warping like a dream collapsing, the Watcher's laughter followed, cruel and delighted. The fifth writes, the sixth dreams, and the seventh waits. Soon, child, soon the circle is whole. The Hollow Ones, Part 1, Unwriting, Chapter 1. The last word, Marianne S. body was covered in words now. Her arms, her chest, even her face carved in living script. Every line throbbed like veins full of fire. She could feel the sleeper turning below the earth, its dreams bubbling through her skin. If she didn't stop, she would become nothing more than parchment for it to write upon. So she made a choice. She opened the journal to a blank page and wrote, Marianne does not exist. Chapter 2. The Vanishing. The cathedral shook. Her name peeled off the walls where she'd carved it. Her reflection blurred in the puddles. Even the faces of the Hollow Ones stuttered, their attention slipping. For one moment she faded. And in that moment the city sighed with relief. The grinning faces closed their mouths. The Hollow Man's lungs deflated. The Watcher's countless eyes blinked shut. But the journal bled through her attempt. New words seared into the page, written in her own hand though she hadn't moved. The writer cannot unwrite herself, the pen must always remain. The page turned black. Her body slammed back into existence, harder, heavier, her veins screaming with new letters. Wiener, Chapter 3. The mark of the sixth. She staggered to the altar, vomiting blood that wriggled like worms. Her shadow lengthened across the wall, stretching until it touched the ceiling. But it wasn't her shadow anymore, it was curled, fetal, enormous, a faintly glowing map of veins. The sleeper's mark. She wasn't only writing it awake, she was becoming its dream. Chapter 4. The Watcher. Speaks from the cathedral rafters. The Watcher's eyes opened one by one, burning holes into her. You thought you were clever, he whispered into her skull. But you are not the eraser, you are the hand. You are the author of our rising. His voice spread, not only in her mind, but across the entire city. Refugees miles away woke screaming, clutching their skulls as the words echoed inside them. The fifth writes, the sixth dreams, the seventh waits. Our chapter 4. The seventh shadow that night, Marianne dreamed again. Not of the Hollow Ones, not even of the sleeper. She dreamed of a vast emptiness, a void with no walls, no sky, no ground. And in that emptiness a figure stood. It had no face, no body, no form she could describe. Only the sense of an ending, not hunger like the Hollow Man, not patience like the Watcher, not madness like the Grinning One, not dreaming like the sleeper. It was silence, the unwritten. And in her dream it spoke without sound. I am the seventh. When I rise there will be no story, no sight, no breath, no dream, only blank. Marianne woke screaming, blood pouring from her mouth. And across the world, every book, every script, every page of text burned itself blank. The Hollow Ones. Part 3, The Unwritten. Chapter 1. The silence spreads. The morning after her dream, Marianne stumbled through the ruins of the city. Billboards were blank. Newspapers white, graffiti gone. Even the warning signs the government had posted were wiped clean. But it wasn't only writing, street names vanished from memory. Families forgot their children's names. Soldiers forgot who they were meant to fight. The world was losing language itself, a slow drowning in silence. Everywhere she turned, mouths moved soundlessly. The air was filled with people trying to scream words they no longer knew. And still, the journal wrote. On Chapter 2, the words that refused, Marianne opened the book. Most of its pages were empty now, scraped bare by something she hadn't written. But on one surviving page, a single line bled in red ink. The seventh erases what the fifth creates. Her heart froze. If the seventh rose, not only would the Hollow Ones vanish, so would she. She stared at her own name carved into her arm. The letters flickered faintly as though struggling not to fade. If she stopped writing, she would disappear. If she kept writing, she would feed them. On Chapter 3. The Witness. In the subway ruins, Marianne found a child. A girl no older than 8 sitting alone in the dark. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. She did not breathe. Yet when Marianne touched her, she whispered a word. Writer. Marianne staggered back. The child grinned, though her mouth split far too wide. You're the only word left, the girl said. And then the girl's body dissolved into ash. Not burned, erased. Only her whisper remained. echoing in Marianne's head. Oh, Chapter 4. The choice of ink. That night, Marianne sat before the altar with a knife. Her arms were covered, her chest covered, her throat covered in words already. There was only one place left to carve. She pressed the blade against her forehead and wrote, 7th. The cathedral trembled. Every hollow froze. The watcher's eyes widened for the first time, and deep beneath the earth the sleeper turned violently, its dream buckling reality like glass. For Marianne had done what none of them expected. She had begun to write the 7th hollow into herself. In Chapter 4, the blank within her vision collapsed into white. No shadows, no monsters, no city, no world, just blank. And in the blank she stood before the faceless figure again, the 7th. The one that should not yet exist. It reached toward her, but she realized with horror that its hand was hers. Its body was hers. Its absence was hers. You are my page, it whispered. You are the story that ends stories. And when Marianne looked down, she saw her body dissolving into letters, falling from her like dust, unmaking her one word at a time. The Hollow Ones, Part 15, The Blank, Chapter 1. The white world. Marianne floated in nothing. Not air, not light, just absence. Even her own heartbeat was gone, swallowed into silence. Her body unraveled word by word, each letter peeling from her skin like ash. They scattered into the whiteness where they were devoured instantly, leaving no trace. The 7th hollow stood before her, formless, faceless, endless. The more she looked, the less she remembered of what a face was supposed to be. You cannot fight me, it whispered without sound. You are already erased. In Chapter 2, the name that clings, she tried to speak her name to anchor herself. Marianne, she croaked. The word cracked in her mouth. The letters fell, dissolving before they hit the ground. Her name was slipping, her history was slipping. But the journal, her cursed companion, remained in her hands, pulsing like a beating heart. Its pages still bore scars of ink. One word remained unerased inside, writer. She clutched it to her chest. Not Marianne, not survivor, not prey. She was the writer, and for a moment the blank recoiled. Enter Chapter 3. The 7th's temptation. The faceless figure loomed larger, its body blotting out the nothingness. If you write, I erase, it said. That is balance. But together, its hand stretched toward hers, skeletal and infinite. Together we end balance. No breath, no crawling, no smiling, no watching, no dreaming, no writing. Only peace. Marianne's chest seized. The offer was intoxicating, to stop, to rest, to have silence after so long. All she had to do was let go of the journal. Chapter 4. The shadows intrude, but then the whiteness rippled. Black stains spread across the blank, holes opening, crawling inward. From those holes came the others. The hollow man's ragged lungs, the crawler's skittering limbs, the grinning one's endless faces, the watcher's countless burning eyes. And below them all, the sleeper's swollen, dreaming chest. They had followed her into the blank. They bowed not to her, but to the 7th. Erase us, Father, they whispered. Erase the world we have spoiled. Chapter 5. The pen in the void. Marianne's hand trembled on the journal. She realized the truth too late. The Hollow Ones weren't here to fight the 7th. They were here to offer themselves to it. They wanted to end, but only by taking everything with them. And the 7th's faceless form leaned closer, whispering into her bones, write me, child. Write my name and it will all be over. The journal opened by itself. The page was blank, waiting. Her hand began to move, one stroke, two. The beginning of a word no human mouth should speak. If she finished it, the world would collapse into silence. The Hollow Ones. Part 15, The Name That Ends. Chapter 1. The first stroke. Her hand shook as the quill dragged across the page. A single line, black and sharp, burned through the whiteness. The 7th leaned closer, its absence pressing on her like a weight. The Hollow Ones gathered behind it, shivering, grinning, gasping, twitching, begging for the final word. Write me, it whispered, and all is undone. Her wrist burned, her skin split into letters. She could not stop the movement. Chapter 2. The memory anchor. Then something flickered. A sound. Small, fragile. A laugh. Not the grinning one's cacophony, not madness, but human. Her sister's laugh. A memory she'd thought long erased with the rest of her life. For one heartbeat, Marianne remembered. her sister's hand pulling her through a field, a voice calling her name. "Marianne, come on!" the seventh hissed. The hollow one snarled. The blank quaked. She slammed the journal shut. Day chapter 3. The counterstroke. The seventh's whisper became a roar. The faceless figure surged forward. But Marianne forced the journal open again, this time writing not its name but another. Marianne. The word blazed across the page like fire. The whiteness cracked. Splinters of light tore open, stabbing into the hollow ones. The grinning faces melted into blank masks. The crawler's legs folded. The watcher's eyes went blind. Even the sleeper shuddered, its dream unraveling. The seventh recoiled, its faceless void flickering. You cannot write against me, but she already had. Chapter 1. The price of a name. Her body convulsed. Writing herself back into the world tore her apart. Each letter of her name seared into her flesh, burning brighter, heavier. She screamed as her skin turned into script, her veins glowing like molten ink. But with each stroke, the blank shrank. The hollow ones howled as their refuge collapsed, dragged back into a world of names, words, memory. Marianne fell to her knees, bleeding, choking, clinging to the journal. Her name still glowed, but it was fragile. It could vanish again at any moment. Chapter 5. The cracks in reality. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the cathedral. But the world was wrong. Buildings leaned at impossible angles. Streets looped back on themselves. Faces blurred, words bent, clocks ticked backward. The seventh's absence still gnawed at reality, leaving holes of blank where people and places should be. The journal shook in her hands, its cover splitting. Something inside it wanted out. She realized with horror, she hadn't defeated the seventh. She had only bound it to her name, and as long as she existed, so did it. The Hollow Ones, Part 15, the last page. Chapter 1 Drawer. The bound name, the cathedral was collapsing around her. The watcher's eyes flickered and burst like dying stars. The sleeper's dream oozed out of the floor, thick as tar. The grinning faces peeled from the walls, shrieking without mouths. All of them were unraveling. But not because she had won, because she had tied their end to her own name. The journal burned in her hands, glowing brighter than the fires of the city outside. Her name filled every page, bleeding and trembling. Marianne, Marianne, Marianne. Each repetition tore more of the world apart. Chapter 2. The choice. She understood now. There was only one way to end it, to end all of it. She could not unwrite the Hollow Ones without unwriting herself. She was the pen and the ink and the page. Tears cut through the blood on her face as she set the journal on the altar. Her hand trembled around the quill. With one stroke, she began the sentence, Marianne does not exist. Chapter 3. The Great Silence. The world shuddered. Cities folded inward, swallowed whole. Mountains crumbled into dust. Skies split like torn parchment. The Hollow Ones screamed, their shapes flickering, collapsing, vanishing. One by one they fell silent, their hunger, their laughter, their watching eyes, their dreams all erased. And then, so did she. Her body dissolved into script, her name breaking apart letter by letter until there was nothing left but blank. The journal closed by itself. Its cover cracked. Its pages went white. Chapter 4. The blank remains. When the silence cleared, there was no cathedral. No city. No Hollow Ones, no world, only the blank. And within it, a single closed book floating in endless white. Waiting. For another hand, for another name. For another story to begin again. The end.